Hi, it's Matt Chapman, and I'm here with Pramukh Jeyathilak, who is the global head of HR for Fidelity Investments. Pramukh should be in Boston, but we're actually doing this recording in Seattle. Hi, Pramukh.
Hey, Matt. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. I was commenting that your beard looks much bigger than when I saw you last.
Yeah, I call this the COVID beard for whatever it's worth.
I'd actually secretly like to have one the size of that as
Right.
well. So you've been through some big changes
Mhm.
over recent times. I mean, obviously joining Fidelity not that long ago, and I guess leading up to your current role, just take everyone through your career to date, because you've been in some interesting places and interesting locations around the world.
Sure, sure. So thanks, Matt, for having me. First of all, I'm what you would call a career HR person. I went to grad school in India, got a master's in human resources, and gosh, 29 years down the road, I'm still in human resources. And people ask me why. I think I enjoy the profession, but over the last 5 to 6 years, it's also become an area of passion for me. And so I started my career. My first job out of grad school was to set up HR for what was then India's largest recruiting consulting company called Personal Search Services in Bombay. I did that for about 3.5 years. It was a small company. We grew the business from about 35 consultants to about 110 consultants, 3 locations to 6 locations, including an international office. And I always speak about that first job, Matt, because I think that first job taught me a couple of things. That number one, as a HR person, you're truly partnering with the business and driving business outcomes. Two, you've got to help the organization grow through people, which is what I did very early on. And number three, to be able to take some calculated risks in the way you think of your profession. So, in the absence of no one else, I was meant to be the expert in HR. I was the first HR manager for them. So, I took some calculated risks, which I think paid off. Fast forward a little bit in the mid 90s, Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture, as you know, was looking for a HR manager to come and help set up the consulting practice, which was at that time breaking away from Arthur Anderson. So I led HR for Anderson Consulting in India, again out of Bombay, from about the mid 90s to late 90s for about 3.5 years. Again, a lot of startup HR work. And I got the opportunity to know what it is to work in a global organization as opposed to a local Indian company, which was my first job. And then at about 98, 99, Anderson Consulting gave me an opportunity to actually move to Prague in the Czech Republic and take care of HR for a few divisions, which within a group called EMEA Emerging Markets, which are countries like Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, Russia. India was still part of that region, Middle East, Nigeria. So that was a grouping of countries with the headquarters in Prague. Again, as you know, those markets were growing markets. They were emerging markets in the true sense. I did that for about 4 years. I ran a couple of divisions. And during the time Y2K happened, which is an interesting time, Anderson Consulting went from a partnership firm to a publicly listed company. It changed its name from Anderson Consulting to Accenture. So those 4 years in Prague were memorable. And then with Accenture, I moved to the Middle East to lead HR for Middle East Africa. I did that only for 3 months before Microsoft hired me as a regional director for the Middle East out of Dubai. So I did that for about 6 years. Again, high growth, really fun times, culturally very diverse. You had Saudi Arabia, Egypt, you had Lebanon, but you also had countries like Malta and Cyprus and the lower Gulf. So fascinating times. Did that for about 6 years. And then Microsoft asked me to think of my next role. And that's when I moved out of what was then the B2B business for Microsoft into a B2C business for Microsoft, and then moved to Singapore, where I spent 2 years running what was called Greater Asia Pacific for the consumer and online business, which included everything from India right through to Australia, with Korea, China, Japan, Southeast Asia thrown in the mix. And then about 10 years ago, I became the global head of the division that I was the Asia leader for and moved to Redmond, Washington in the United States. And that was, again, a fascinating time for me, being truly a global leader, but ensuring that our global mandate was kind of implemented with a local lens. And so my experiences of having grown through the ranks and being in these multiple countries certainly helped. And then as I was coming to my 10th year, I got this call from this small, I won't say small, a medium-sized company called Amazon, which is about 40,000 people strong, and said, hey, we've got great opportunities in HR. Would you like to join? So I did join them in about 2012. I led HR for all of Amazon's corporate functions initially for about 2 years. And then I got what I think a once in a lifetime opportunity of building a function from the ground up. And I built the learning function for Amazon Web Services. And I led that for about 4.5 years till I got the call to join Fidelity, which I did 9 months ago. So that's been my journey so far.
So everyone, as you listen to Pramukh's perspectives now, that's what it takes to have these perspectives, is a career background like this. So one of the areas I wanted to concentrate on was really your visions around the future of how we will organize work. And, you have been through an interesting time in a new company, just hitting the role just before COVID. So tell us what's on your mind.
I think, Matt, the way work is going to get done in organizations is certainly going to change. I think we've been talking about it. We've been talking about the future of work. We've largely been talking about the future of work from a what perspective. What's the kind of work that we are going to get done as you think out 5 years, 10 years down the road? But I think companies are also going to look at the how work is going to get done. I think that's the additional wrinkle at this time that we need to be, conscious and cognizant about. COVID taught us that how work gets done is probably going to be different than the way we've done things in the past. So a few things that I think comes to my mind is, do we really need to think about work in the context of a long drawn out process? Or do we think of work in agile mindsets in shorter chunks of work, right? So for example, we've all realized that we've got to rally around some key issues that organizations are facing. How do we innovate really quickly within the context of the challenges that we have? How do we adapt our model to serve customer needs much faster? How do we show up for our customers and clients very differently than we have in the past? So let me give you a simple example. If you are working in an organization where you have a customer-facing entity like a bank, like a financial institutions, where customers were going to you and seeking help one-on-one and in person. Now, in the times of COVID, if you have to shut down a branch, how do you still continue to be relevant for your customer? So the how of the work that needs to be done has to be rethought and reimagined. The other thing is the organizing principle, right? Now, what we've realized, and most companies have realized, is there's a bit of an all hands on deck approach when it comes to crisis management. So you're not necessarily kind of sticking to your swim lanes, but you're trying to transfer the skills and capabilities that you have across those swim lanes. Let's put a SWAT team together. Let's think about how we want to safely bring people back into the workplace. Now, some organizations have got experts who can do that, but some organizations don't. So in the context of the new reality, how do you get people organized differently within the context of outcomes and within shorter cycles, and let them go on and look at other things? I think it's the second kind of paradigm. I think the third paradigm is, once you work in an area of uncertainty, there are people who want work done but don't know how work gets done. So one of the things that I've been thinking through is there going to be a concept called a marketplace, where even within established organizations, people are going to post, and I'm using air quotes, of things that need to be done either for a customer, a client, or for internal associates. And how do we ensure that we use technology to capture what those opportunities are in a kind of a marketplace environment, and our people then come in, grab that work, go deliver that in shorter cycles, but still continue to keep their, what I call their day jobs going. So I think times like this has got us probably to think a little differently, because in times of uncertainty, what you can do is do what you have with, right? You've got resources that you can play with. And how do you use the resources in a strategic and meaningful manner is probably an area that a lot of leaders are thinking about right now.
I think beautifully put, and the way you just described that really gets me excited
Hmm.
about the future, and is what I think about a lot too, as well. Now, we also talked earlier just on leadership, and
Sure.
you had some views on leadership as well.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there, Matt. Number one, there were times when leaders could be present. And I say be present in air quotes, because if you work in a global organization, leaders can be at all places at all times. But there was a direct connection that leaders had with associates. And sometimes the hierarchy of leadership mattered in the way they manage people. I think you're now going to focus more on outcomes than processes. You've got to focus more on outputs than inputs. And my view, and the reason for me to say that is based on the following. Number one, people are looking for direction on what does success look like. So if I work with you, if you and I have an agreement of what success looks like, the what of the job, how I go about doing it is not something that you need to be involved in or you're going to influence me in a significant manner. I can work keeping the outcome in mind and work backwards from it. So leaders have to define outcomes and outputs more than trying to manage inputs and processes. So that's one thing. Leaders also have to learn how to delegate more, right? I think you've got to innately build trust to delegate work down the chain than you've done in the past. That probably is another leadership attribute that I think is going to come into play more significantly. And the third thing is resilience, right? I mean, when you go through changes of this nature, how do you hold things together? How do you look at business resilience? How do you look at associate resilience? And how do you bring that skill into play on an ongoing basis? I think are the opportunities that we have in front of us.
Thanks, Pramukh. And that was Pramukh in Seattle. And great words of optimism there that really make me excited. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Matt.